Nola, do you have to be playing with my shoe? Shoes. It's a thing. Wait, I didn't get to the good part. Okay, so he says, thinking about getting some Invisalign. Don't think I can afford it. Hi everyone, it's me, Jess. Welcome back to my channel. I don't know why this frame is so tight. It's zoomed in. I don't think it's zoomed in though. I think I just have to move my chair back. I have a wheelie chair, so I can wheel my chair back a little bit. There we go. But yeah, I don't know if you guys saw this one, but I had a video where I demonstrated my sideways floor. Yep. Takes a lot of effort to stay in one place because my floors are slanted. Anyway, I am here today to do the second part 2 of the 2-part series on my summer wrap-up, or my July-August wrap-up. I'm going to start with the one that I had a bit of trouble with, and then really the other 3 I loved, so I'll talk about those. It's sweater weather. It's sweater weather, everyone. I had to get a cardigan because it's a little chilly today. I always talk about the weather on my channel. If you come to my channel, you'll be able to find me complaining about tech, talking about the weather, disciplining my dog, or trying to, and what else? What other topics besides books? That's pretty much it, I think. I'm going to start off with a book that I read in August. It actually took me a while to finish this book. It's Bitter Orange by Claire Fuller. It took me quite some time to finish this book, which was a bit of a shock because I absolutely adored, like many people, I adored Unsettled Ground. And I had as one of my goals at the beginning of the year that I was going to read other books, backlist books by authors that I had discovered in 2021. And one of those authors was Claire Fuller. And I even did a poll asking people, should I read Swimming Lessons or should I read Bitter Orange? The majority said Bitter Orange, so I went ahead and picked this one up. And I have to say that I really struggled with this book. So I'll just give you the outline of the plot. Bitter Orange is a story about the main character, Frances, is a very reserved, very sheltered woman. She has spent most of her life taking care of her ailing mother up until the point where her mother dies. And there's some really strange things in this book that I'm not going to get into, but there are some strange things about her character. There are strange things about all 3 of the main characters. The story is told from her perspective, but she doesn't have a lot of life experience outside of taking care of her mom, who I believe died sometime in her midlife. But she has been invited by this wealthy American who has bought an estate called the Lintons, and she's been employed by this wealthy American to go to the estate and assess the value of the property, like the outside property. Like, she spent some time in the Follies. I had to look that up. And anyway, that's what she's there for. And there's another character who's there who is employed by this wealthy American, to do basically the same thing, but with the interior of this mansion. So it's like this crumbling old mansion in the English countryside. And she finds herself there with this man, Peter, and his wife, Kara. And it sounds really intriguing, at least the premise of it. Like, I was quite interested to read it because the premise is that there's a peephole in the floorboards of her room, and if she looks through it, she can spy on this couple. And I thought that was a really good premise for a book. However, there was a lot of things about this book that just didn't, I don't know, it just didn't work for whatever reason. It's a little bit hard to put your finger on why it doesn't work, but I will try to explain what I had an issue with. But before we get there, I'll just describe. So Peter is pretty flirtatious with Frances, which is weird because so there's this kind of a strange, I think it's only in her mind, idea that he's interested in her. So I think it's just a fantasy of hers ultimately, because she does try to follow through on that and is outright rejected quite precipitously. So you get the impression that this character, Frances, is really, like, she doesn't have enough social experience to understand how to be interacting with other people. However, Peter's wife, Cara, is quite a character as well. She's like this young Irish woman who just fabricates a lot of nonsense and stories about her life, which is entertaining, kind of. Like, she seems to have a flair for drama, and she likes to tell lots of tall tales, and she likes to stir the pot and like get reactions out of people, particularly out of Frances. And she's constantly going into these emotional kind of fits, or maybe tantrums isn't the right word, but these emotional kind of hysterical responses to things like birds dying and that sort of stuff. So I think the characters are interesting, the idea was interesting, but the execution, there's something in the execution. The way that the story is structured is that it's going back and forth between Frances on her deathbed, being seen, visited by the vicar, and the vicar is trying to get her to confess to something. So we know that something happens between these three out in this mansion during this summer, but we don't know what. So that's the hook of the story. But yeah, so that flipping back and forth between the present day and that summer, I found that to be kind of confusing. Like, I would read a whole section and not realize that it was present day because it wasn't, the delineation of the timelines wasn't made super clear. So I found that to be a little bit difficult. And I think the other thing is just that I didn't, like it says on the back, and this is what I was expecting, say a rich, dark pressure cooker of a novel. Like, I didn't get, Ruth Ware suggests that it's a pressure cooker, and I didn't get that feeling from it. Like, the tension wasn't there from my reading of it. I don't know, it just didn't connect. I didn't feel really strongly connected to the characters. I think that all the groundwork is kind of laid here, and she's able to execute some of those ideas really well in Unsettled Ground in a way that she wasn't able to do in Bitter Orange. And I'm not the only person with that opinion, because I know I've seen a couple of other people say the same thing. Yeah, I don't know. I was so disappointed. I know that's probably not fair to Claire Fuller but yeah, it wasn't really what I was expecting. And it took me a really long time to finish reading it because I just it felt very jumbled and disconnected to me, the way that it was written. It just didn't have a very good execution. I guess that's the best way that I could put it. So that was a bit of a disappointment, but the rest of the books that I read, I absolutely loved. Two of which I read during my vlog when I was in Nova Scotia, which, if you watch my videos, you might have seen that. The first one is The Body by Stephen King, and this was a really good book. I knew it was a good book, but I don't see very many people talk about it, and I really wanted to read it during the summer because, again, it's set on a hot few days of high summer thunderstorms and hot heat in somewhere in America. I know it says where, but I don't recall. And it was the inspiration, or the 1986 film Stand By Me was based on this book. And this book was just so well executed. Like, if we want to talk about execution, this book was so well executed. I mean, Stephen King doesn't even have to do too much. It's not a very long, I guess you could call it a novella. It's like 170 some pages, maybe 180. And he doesn't even have to do all that much with the characters, and you're attached to these four boys right away. So let me just back it up and explain the plot for anybody who doesn't know the plot is Stand By Me, which is based on The Body by Stephen King. So the story is about Gordy LaChance and his three friends, Vinny, Teddy, and Chris, who are all 12, 13 years old, and it's set in 1960. They're all going to go on a trip, like not a road trip, a road trip by foot. They're all going on an adventure to find the body of a missing boy. And they think they know where it is because they overheard somebody saying where it was. And so they go on this adventure together. And it's extremely nostalgic. It's organized so that the story about the boys and their adventure is mixed with short stories that Gordy LaChance has written, and because he's a aspiring writer, and those are pretty fun. And it's just this very wonderful, and also Stephen King wraps the story up very tidily. We know what happens to everyone at the end in terms of their lives. It's a very complete novel. It's a very complete story. The characters are very compelling. And I think the reason why it works so well and what I loved about it is, first of all, it's very nostalgic. It's a great coming of age story, but it captures a time, a specific time in America where boys have this kind of idea of masculinity that they're trying to live up to. And because they're young, they're very like they're children, so they have this kind of softness about them, and they find themselves in these various different conflicts, and they're trying to behave in the way that they're expected to behave, and all of the men around them are really representing this kind of toxic masculinity that they're expected to become, like they're expected to adhere to or to become a part of. And you can't help but empathize, feel sentimental about these four boys. So it's just such a great study in character development, with very, very little, like he doesn't need a lot to be able to really give you a strong sense of those boys and their character and their relationships to each other, and the reasons why, the kinds of contradictions that they're facing about being men, being boys, and about growing up. So yeah, it's just a brilliant book, such a great book, so well written, so well rounded, the characters, and just a complete story. And I absolutely loved it. It was great. So yeah, if you haven't read it and you like the movie, or if you haven't seen the movie, watch the movie and read the book. It's just great. Really strong piece of writing. Now, I wouldn't say that about all of Stephen King's works. I mean, and many of them are super long. So this one was just fantastic. And then I think I'm going to talk about what I think is my favorite. Well, the next two I loved as well. The other one I vlogged about was Persuasion by Jane Austen. I spoke a lot about this and the body in my vlog. I had been pretty skeptical about Jane Austen because I'd read Sense and Sensibility and I really just did not get along with it. I didn't find it that entertaining, but I absolutely fell in love with Anne Elliot, the main character in Persuasion. I don't think I'm alone. I think I've seen other people say like this, you know, of all of the Jane Austens, Pride and Prejudice and Persuasion tend to be people's favorites. So yeah, I really enjoyed this book. The plot summary is just that Anne Elliot, who's an older character, so I guess she's one of the older protagonists that Jane Austen has written about. She fell in love with a man named Captain Wentworth 8 years previous to when the story is set, and her family had convinced her that he was not suitable for her to marry, that he wasn't advanced enough in society for her, because when you get married in a Jane Austen novel, it's about your position in society, right? So it's not for love. And so she decides not to marry her true love, Captain Wentworth, and she finds herself at this point where we are when we meet her. She finds herself in a situation where her father's fortune has dwindled and he needs to rent out his home, and they go to stay in Bath. So the majority of this is set in Bath, and it's there that she finds herself again in the same social circles as Captain Wentworth 8 years later. And he's kind of acting very nonchalant, and it seems like he's interested in her friend. I think her friend's name is Louisa. And it's just about this love that finds itself again. Strange way to say it. Second chance. It's a second chance at love, ultimately. But it takes a while for them to figure out that they both still love each other. And I just thought it was really great. What I really loved the most about this book was the character of Anne, for sure. I think just her commentary throughout the book on society and women in society and this idea of marriage being so important is great. And I also just really like that Anne is kind of this woman who seems like she might not be as happy as she would be if she was able to be with the man that she loved, but she was content enough in society not being married and not necessarily pursuing someone else. So despite the fact that she's not married, she hasn't given up on her life or the pleasure of her life or enjoyment of life. And she's also super responsible. Like, she's the one in the family who knows what to do when there's a problem. I just think she's really strong, a really strong female character. And I think that was the big reason why I like this book so much. And also there's a lot of maritime stuff, which I do enjoy. And it was very fitting that I read it while I was in Nova Scotia, which is of course on the ocean. Yes, very much loved Persuasion. I've only read 2 Jane Austens, but I think it's safe to say that it's my favorite Jane Austen. And maybe I will read some more. Maybe next July I will. Which brings me to the last book that I'm going to wrap, that I'm going to review. It sounds so strange to say reviews because really I don't think of myself that way, but just to share what my reading experience was with you for these 4 books. And this is the last one, and it's my Policeman. Look, I got the copy that I wanted because you know the saga of my copy if you've been following along on my channel. And this book, which apparently the film, which just screened at the Toronto International Film Festival, I've been seeing some chatter about it, and people are saying good things about it. So I think it's going to be interesting to watch the film when it's available. The book got me. I really, really loved this book. I just thought it was the most romantic, not billed as a romance novel. It was really a book about, the main theme of this book was love and friendship and also freedom. This book is really a love triangle between a woman named Marion who's married to a policeman named Tom, who then falls in love with another man named Patrick, who Tom meets at the Brighton Museum because Patrick is, I don't know if he's the director. What is his role in the museum? A curator at the Brighton Museum, and just very likable characters. Most of the book is told through the perspective of Marion, but I think some of it is also told through the perspective of Patrick later on. And it does go back and forth in its timeline. Like, Marion is with Patrick and trying to get Tom to come and speak to him and be with him because he's dying. He's had a stroke. That's not really a spoiler because it's like from the beginning of the book, because I think it opens with that. But the first part of the book, I mean, I fell in love with Tom. I mean, he's called My Policeman because these 2 characters have to share Tom, this policeman. And, you know, I think it's unknown to Marion for most of the book, but there's a point where she realizes. And I really fell in love with this policeman character, and I really fell in love with Patrick too. And even Marion's a really likable character. Like, they're all just really likable characters. And there is a point where something happens, which I'm not going to say because I don't want to spoil it, which kind of puts their friendship and this love triangle in jeopardy, and it's a betrayal of sorts. But it's just a wonderful book, and I just think it's so romantic. So it's set in the 1950s at a time when homosexuality was not legal. So people who were gay had to basically hide their relationships and their sexuality. And I think that there's a lot there that, so it's sort of a coming of age story for Tom because he discovers his identity, although he's younger than Patrick and Patrick's more senior. And I think that was just beautifully written as well. It's just a beautiful book. I really loved it. A lot of people, I've seen reviews of people who didn't like this book, but I really, really liked it. So I'll just read you a little part from the first part of the story where Tom is teaching Marion how to swim which is the point where I fell in love with Tom. Nice cap, he said with a half smirk, and then glancing down at my sandals, those will have to come off. And then he says, okay, we'll go in together. Don't think about it too much. Hold on to me. We'll just get you used to the water. It's not too cold today, quite warm in fact. It's always warmest this time of year, and it's very calm, so it's all looking good. Nothing to worry about. It's also very shallow here, so we'll have to wade out a bit. Ready? Like, it's so cute. So they get a little further into the water, and it says, Nola, don't bark during this. Good, you're doing well. Now we're going to do the tiniest bit of swimming. All I want you to do is follow me, and when we're deep enough, let your feet lift off the bottom and I'll hold you up just so you can feel what it's like. Is that all right? Was that all right? His face was so serious when he asked me this that it was hard to keep from laughing. How could I object to the prospect of Tom holding me? We waded further out, and the water took my thighs and waist, touching every part of me with its freezing tongue. Then, when the sea was up to my armpits and beginning to splash at my mouth, leaving a salty trail on my lips, Tom put a hand flat on my stomach and pressed. Feet off the bottom, he commanded. Utterly mesmerized by the huge strength of that hand on my stomach and by Tom's eyes, blue and changing like the sea on mine, I felt my feet lift and I was borne upward by the salt and the rocking motion of the water. Tom's hand was there, a steady platform. I tried to keep my head above the waves, and for a second everything balanced perfectly on Tom's flat hand, and I heard him say, "Good, you're almost swimming." It's just so cute. And Tom is just so, I don't know, so reassuring. And also kind of, what's the word? Kind of earnest. So yeah. I hear that Harry Styles does a great job, actually, of portraying Tom in the film. So I'm looking forward to seeing it. And on that note, I just adored this book. I thought it was really great. Yeah, I just think that the nuance of the way that it was written and the nuance and the complexity of young people that are trying to figure out who they are and what their sexuality is. I thought it was just a really wonderful book. And somehow, like, it's not, although it was set in this other time when obviously people would handle their desires differently, not really that different. I mean, yes, we're more out now today, but I do think that there's something about this book that still really resonated. Yeah, I hope I'm not rambling too much, but I highly recommend. If you haven't read it yet, I think it's great. I'm going away this weekend. I'm heading up to the White Mountains in New Hampshire, which is very exciting. I wasn't planning on taking my camera with me, but you never know. And I don't think I'm going to get a lot of reading done because I'm visiting with an old friend that I haven't seen in a long time, and it's a super short visit, so we shall see. I'm not going to vlog though. I'm only doing like 3 or 4 vlogs a year now. And let me know in the comments below if you'd like vlogs and you'd like me to do more, but I don't know if there's much of an appetite for my vlogs. So let me know in the comments below. And let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them. And I will see you next time. Bye. Bye. See you next time. Bye. Oh man. I always get so anxious when I turn on the camera. I don't know if anyone else out there gets anxious when they turn on the camera, but I definitely do. I almost get like a little bit hyper. I don't know if anyone can tell, or do I hide it well? She's the protagonist. She's the main character. She's a hike, a foot trip, a day trip, a camping trip. Yeah, some of it is also told to, some of it is also going to come up with a sign off.